She had endured more than any creature's hold just to make it far enough to give him a chance the scream tore through. The stillness of dawn, raw and guttural, echoing across the frozen woodsoft Montana inside a modest cabin on the edge of the forest. Edgar and Mary jolted awake. That sound, it wasn't just wild. It was desperate. They moved to the window wand. Their stumbling through the snow came. A lynx, her legs trembled with every step. Her coat was matted and darkened, and in her jaws 2 tiny motionless bundles of fur. She dragged herself closer, barely standing 20 feet from the porch. 10 feet, then she collapsed. The lynx lay still. The forest went silent. Least sound left was the whimper of the 2 small bodies curled beside her. Mary gasped. Edgar was already reaching for his coat. Mary ran for a wool blanket, her hands trembling. Edgar knelt beside the fallen lynx, brushing away the snow that clung to her fur. She was still breathing barely. Her chest rose in shallow, uneven gasps. The 2 kittens, no older than 6 weeks, were curled tightly against her side, eyes wide, too small to understand what was happening. Edgar carefully scooped them up, cradling their tiny trembling bodies against his chest. They were freezing silent, waiting for Amethyr, who could no longer answer. He looked down at the lynx, her eyes wereupon locked on her kittens. She didn't flinch, didn't move. She was watching them, still guarding them until the last moment. And then her breath stopped, her gaze faded. The last strength in her body had been spent carrying her babies to safety. She had made it just far enough. She had chosen this house, these people, as their last hope. She had saved them from something that had taken everything from her. Edgar held the kittens' claws as Mary returned with the blanket. The snow began to fall again, quietly, covering the motionless form of the mother lynx. This was never a story they intended to be part of, but it became Theon that changed everything inside the cabin. The fire had already begun to warm the room, but the chill clung to the kittens like a shadow. Mary wrapped them gently in the blanket, her fingers careful not to startle their teeny, fragile forms. They barely moved, just the softest twitch of an ear, a quiver in their paws. Edgar stood by the window, staring out into the trees where Lynx had come from. Somewhere out there was the threat. She had fled something she couldn't outrun, but she hadn't come here for herself. She had come for them. They placed thecatons in a shallow box lined with towels. Just beside the hearth, one off them, the smaller of the 2, let out a faint rasping mewl. Mary dropped to her knees. You're safe now," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Then came a low growl. Luna, their old Australian shepherd, stood frozen at the edge of Therum, her body stiff, ears back, eyes locked on the small creatures in the box. She crept forward, duck sniffing. The air uncertain. These were not puppies, no tanny things she knew, but she could smell. Fear the cold, the silence. She didn't bark, didn't lunge. She simply sat down, watching, listening, waiting. The fire cracked, the wind howled outside. Inside, 3 lives held their breath. They named the mash and fern, names drawn from Thephorus that had nearly taken them, and the life they now had a chance to grow into. Ash, the slightly larger one, with a streak of smoky gray across his back. Fern, more delicate, with cautious green eyes that never seemed to blink. Edgar and Mary built them a nest near the fireplace. Layers of soft towels and wool blankets shaped into a cocoon of warmth. A shallow dish with warm milk was placid, bathed them. The first time Ash Lochodon, it was. Clumsy, desperate. Fern followed soon after, trembling but hungry. Every sip was a victory. Every twitch of their tinny tails meant hope. Mary kept notes on a pad near the hearth. Every fighting, every change in weight, every sound they made. These weren't just wild animals now. They were something else Summathinjan trusted. And all the while, Luna watched it. First, she stayed at a distance, lying near the kitchen doorway, her eyes locked on the newcomers. Her instincts conflict. She was a herder by nature, a protector. But this was different. These creatures smelled wild, foreign, and yet so small, so vulnerable. 3 days passed. The 4th morning, Mary woke to find Luna lying beside the box, one of Thecatons. Fern had crawled halfway out during the night and was now curled beneath Luna's chin. The old dog didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply breathed slowly and evenly, as if afraid to whack at the little one later that day. Luna returned from outside with a soft plush toy in her mouth, a tattered rabbit shoost too. play with as a pup. She dropped it beside Ash and gave a low questioning. One Ash batted it weakly, then collapsed onto it. Luna wagged her talons. By the end of the week, Luna was sleeping beside them every night. She cleaned their ears, nudged them. Gently hen they stirred, even let them climb clumsily onto her side to nap. She never barked, never growled. She wasn't their mother, but she had chosen to be. The days grew longer, and the snow began to soften around the edges of the cabin, and side life unfolded. In small miraculous mints, Ash was the first to venture bay in the nest. Awkward, wobbly steps on a Versailles paws, curiosity outwying Cordanian fern, followed close behind more. Cautious, always watching her brother, before trying anything herself, Luna remained close, her gaze steady, her movements patient. She guided them without words, blocking their path gently hen. They strayed too far, nudging them forward. When they hesitated, she became their boundary, their corrosion. Their warmth all at once, said Gar. And Mary watched from the kitchen doorway one morning as Luna led the two bobcat kittens across the wooden floor to the porch. The door had been left open, just a crack letting in the scent of melting snow and pine needles. The kittens sniffed the air. Pawthos hovering at the threshold between wild and safe, Luna stepped outside, first turning to look back. Ash followed, his tony claws tapping on the wooden boards. Then Fern, hesitant but trusting that morning, marked their first step into Thorold. Beyond the firelight they explored the porch under Luna's watchful eye, batting at twigs, chasing shadows, testing with wind. When a bird startled from a nearby branch, both kittens bolted back inside. Luna didn't move. She let them renand when they peered back out. She wastled their waiting in the days that followed. This became their ritual. Every morning exploration, every evening return. Grew bolder, climbing onto logs, anderding. After falling leaves, Fern learned to stalk, to crouch low and move without a sound, until Luna would catch her with a gentle paw and roll her onto her back, ending the lesson in a tumble of fur and soft growls. The porch became their classroom, the woods their mystery bot. Luna was home. It happened without warning. Ash and Fern had been pushing their boundaries, exploring farther into the woods each day. That afternoon, something drew them deeper. Sound, a scent, a flicker of movement just by in the clearing, and then they were gone. Luna chased after them, banishing Ginto the trees. By nightfall, only one returned. Fern burst through the underbrush, muddy and wide-eyed. Her side sheaving with breathless panic, Mary swept her up onto the porch, scanning Thetrine for any sign of Ash or Luna. But forest remained silent that night. Was long and heavy. The fire burned low. Mary barely moved from the window. Edgar sat with his boots on, waiting for Donna. First light, he stepped into the trees, lantern in hand. The forest held its breath. Half an hour in, he spotted prints faint but fresh. He followed them through the undergrowth, deeper, colder, and then he saw them. Ash lay curled beneath a low brush, right, his tiny body shaking from the cold. His fur was wet, his paws tucked tight against his chest, beside him, unmoving. Was Luna rapidaring him, her head resting protectively over his back? She looked up when Edgar approached. Her eyes were tired but calm. She hadn't come back because she'd never lived. She had stayed with him all night alone, not out of duty, but because he washers back at the cabin. The fire roar die as Mary wrapped Ash in warm towels, her hands trembling with relief. His breath was shallow but steady. His tiny paws twitched as he curled deeper into the fabric, reaching for the heat he had narrowly lost. Luna stood nearby, soaked and silent, her eyes never leaving him. She didn't seek attention, didn't ask for comfort. She simply watched, making Sareth safe. Fern crept closer, sniffing her brother, then pressed her head gently against Luna's chest. Luna responded with a low, reassuring huff, lowering herself so both kittens could rest against her. That evening, they all lay together by the hearth, Ash, Fern, and Luna, wrapped in the same blanket. No one spoke. There was no need. In the days that followed, Ash grew stronger. He moved slower than before, a little more cautious now. Booth's spirit returned with every sunriser. Stayed close to him, no longer Theflower, but the guardian. Luna became their center. She taught them again how to play, how to trust the ground. Benethire paused. She licked their ears when they were afraid, guided them back when they strayed, not with force, but with presence. Mary sometimes found herself as standing at the door, watching them through the window, watching a dog in tow. Wild bobcats sleep side by side, resatered or move like a pack, and sometimes whispered aloud to no one but Thoend. She's not just raising them, she's bumming a part of them 2 weeks past. Forest seemed calm, quiet under Thislo thaw of spring. Ash and fern grew bolder, again leaping farther, climbing eager. Luna was always with them, never ahead, never behind, just near enough to catch them if they fell. But danger in th wild never warns. It happened late in the afternoon. From deep within the wood steer was a sudden burst of chaos, Lunaspark, sharp and furious than a violent tile. Mary froze. Edgar dropped his Mugend, ran for the door. Seconds later they heard it, snarling, howling, the unmistakable shriek of threat. Coyotes. Edgar grabbed the rifle and charged into the trees. What he found stopped his breath. In a narrow clearing, Luna stood bet. Ween, Ash, and Fern, and 3 circling coyotes. Her body low, her hackles recede, a snarl ripping from her throat, blood streaked her shoulder, but she didn't move. She held her ground, the kitten scoured behind her eyes, wide frozen in place. Edgar didn't hesitate. One warning shot into the air, and the coyote scattered into the underbrush. Like smoke, Luna didn't chase them. She simply turned and nudged Ash and Fern with her nose and limped back toward the cabin. That night's house was silent. Luna lay on a blanket near the fire, her wound cleaned but raw.
Ow.
Mary sat beside her, gently wiping the blood from her fur. Ash and Fern refused to leave her side. Fern curled close, laying her head gently across Luna's neck. Ash pressed against their ribs, his body trembling. No one slept, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. They were keeping watch. Time moved quietly, as it always does in the woods. Ash and Fern grew leaner, stronger. Their paws landed softer now. Their movements more fluid, more wild. The forest had begun to claim them in small ways. Muscle instinct, hunger, but the bond they carried from the cabin, it never faded. The wooden shelter Edgar had built beside the house became their second home, lined with straw, shaded from their rain. It was where they returned after every adventure. Sometimes just before it exits after dark, but always there turned. And always Luna was waiting. She would rise slowly, ears perked, tail wagging once or twice, not out of command and out of duty, but like a mother knows the sound of her children's steps on the ground. Even when the wind trees to hide it, Ash began bringing things back. Gnarled sticks, cracked pine connaissance, even a bright blue feather. Still warm, he would drop them near the shelter and look at Luna expectantly. Tail flicking, she would sniff them, nudge them gently, then nuzzle his cheek. Fern preferred silence. She didn't bring trophies. She brought herself, curling against Luna's side. Without a sound, purring low in her throat, the same way she had as a kitten. They didn't question where they belonged. They didn't wonder if they were wild or tame dog or cathenter or companion. They knew only this place, this shelter, this warmth. This was home in Luna. She was never just a protector. She was their family. With the arrival of spring, the forest began to pull them farther. Ash and Fern, now full-grown, moved like shadows, silent, swift, wild. At first they were gone for a day, to then a week. The clearing behind the house would sit quiet for days. At a time, Edgar and Mary never called out. They didn't try to stop it, and Luna shouldn't chase. She only watched the treen, her ears lifting at every sound, her eyes soft, waiting not with worry but with trust. Sometimes in the quiet after squay, 2 shapes would appear through the trees, moving as one. Ash and Fern side by side, their movements calm, their eyes bright. They would step onto the porch without a sound, press their bodies into Luna's, and rest. They never stayed long, but they always came back. They greeted Edgar and Mary, not with fear, but with something deeper. Recognition, respect, azalent knowing, because home isn't always where you live. Sometimes it's who waited for you, who fought for you, who never left. Ash and Fern had become creators off the wild, but they never forgot Ho had loved them when they were small and broken. And Luna, she was never just a dog. She was their beginning, their warmth, their anchor. Sometimes family isn't ha looks like you. It's who stayed when you were weakest, who became everything you list and more. If this story touched you, flew us here at Hope and Fur, there are more stories waiting in the wild, off healing of trust, of impossible love.